science fiction monster can be explained scientifically and combated technologically. We have to kill them. It's that simple.
A monster boils down all of our fears into something that we can see.
I literally went under my seat and I said to my dad, tap me on the shoulder when it's over.
That's a big part of what science fiction is.
It is.
Taking that fear of the creature in the forest and now letting us feel it in a safe place.
It's fun to be in a darkened theater and imagine your world ending because of a giant lobster.
I have dreams. Creatures are coming at me.
Must go faster.
Suspense starts in the stomach, and it goes up to the throat, and then it comes out as a scream.
It's this primeval instinct in us to escape the bear in the woods.
Will is alive.
Science fiction monster movies allow us to explore those dark parts of ourselves that we don't want to admit actually exist.
This is a creature who asks why he is here. What is he for? Who created him?
And we always beat them at the end, which was our way of keeping the boogeyman at bay. You're a horror guy, as you tell me every time we talk about this. So the question is, where is that interzone, that crosstalk between horror and science fiction?
The great distinction is the fuel for the early horror tales has to be spiritual. It comes from the belief of good and evil.
Right.
And then there comes a point in Western literature in which the element includes now science.
Science. So today it's radioactivity, genetic engineering, robotics. And before, our monsters came from folklore, mythology, demons, the supernatural world.
Yes. We create these monsters as composites that warn us about the possible adversity of the natural world.
Yeah.
And one proof of that, I read somewhere that dragons are universal because they are the composite of the three main predators of the anthropoids.
Snake.
Snake, feline, and large rapacious birds.
So it's a mashup of archetypes.
Yeah. Of things that you need to be afraid of.
So fear of teeth and claws and being chased and all those things is a healthy thing.
Yes.
And it cycles in our brains in our nightmares and in our monster movies.
I actually think dinosaurs are the best monsters because they actually existed. Like a lot of the crazy monsters in films and in science fiction, you can console yourself by saying, yeah, but it's not real, really, it's not real. Whereas with dinosaurs, you can't do that. They were real. Like, it makes it more scary.
Jurassic Park really deserves classic status. I myself remember gasping, and I think a lot of people in the audience did, at the first shot where they pull back and give you a wide-angle view of this giant, giant dinosaur.
We, as an audience, are going through exactly what the characters are going through. We're seeing, for the first time ever in human history, dinosaurs alive.
When I was a kid, I used to take my popsicle sticks, and I would basically glue them together in the form of a dinosaur, and I would bury it, and then I would wait a week.
Till it fossilized.
And then I would go looking for it again. That was my closest moment of trying to be an amateur paleontologist.
Cut to years later, and you're working on Jurassic Park.
Yeah. You know, and Michael Crichton just came up with the perfect concept. I'll tell you one conceptual line. I'm writing a book about dinosaurs and DNA.
Yeah.
And that's all he would say.
Right. Well, I got sent the book. I got to the scene where the Tyrannosaurus Rex licks the windshield with the kids inside.
Right.
I said, I gotta make this movie. I never even finished the book. I called up, and he said, Steven just bought it.
Well, what happened was...
And you know what? You know what? It was the very, very best thing that could have happened, because I would have made it like Aliens. I would have made an R-rated, scare the crap out of you movie. And you made it just scary enough, but still a movie for kids.
Because I was the 12-year-old me telling that story.
Some of those dinosaurs, as you know, were Dennis Muren and CGI special effects. Steven Spielberg would be on a bullhorn off camera and be going, "Arr," and making some dinosaur sounds.
Camera?
And we'd be looking at a tennis ball. But some of them were Stan Winston puppetry. When we came to this clearing and saw this life-sized, full-sized Triceratops, and the 7 people who were making it blink and breathe and do things were kind of hidden behind it. Oh, that was something.
Steven Spielberg, he wanted the dinosaurs to have some monster abilities and to be seen as monsters. But I was brought in to make sure that 6th graders didn't send him nasty notes about things being wrong. There was a scene where the velociraptors come into the kitchen and are chasing the children around. And Steven wanted the raptors to come in and stick out a tongue, like a lizard or a snake would do. And I said, we know for sure that dinosaurs did not do that. And so we decided the raptor looks through the window and it snorts and it fogs up the window. And only a warm-blooded animal can do that.
Science fiction monster movies are very much about the monster of humanity. In Jurassic Park, our scientist, John Hammond, very much wants to recreate dinosaurs to prove that he can do something no one else has done. And that creates a chain of disasters that in turn creates a physical monster, the literal manifestation of the bad actions of those humans.
I wanted to show them something that wasn't an illusion. Something that was real. Something that they could see and touch.
John Hammond represents a ringmaster.
Right.
He's the Ringling Brothers of bringing these species back to life. And his intentions are pure.
Yeah.
He wants everybody to come see these dinosaurs. He wants children to get tears in their eyes when they marvel at these creatures that they only could see in storybooks. And at the same time, he is blind to what he's doing.
That's right.
Like all mad scientists.
Yeah, and Jeff Goldblum is such a great conscience.
Oh yeah, he's the voice of the audience.
Says, nature will find a way.
He says that, life finds a way.
Life finds a way.
And he's right every single time.
Life breaks free, it expands to new territories, and it crashes through barriers painfully, maybe even dangerously, but, well, there it is.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
This idea that in Jurassic Park, the female dinosaurs are capable of changing so that they can reproduce is brilliantly foreshadowed when Sam Neill gets into the helicopter before they get to Isla Nublar. And he's got 2 seatbelts that are both female, but of course they can't stick together. So what he does is he ties them in a knot around his waist. And that's the whole film, isn't it? It's the whole idea that life will find a way. Evolution is an innovator that finds a way to survive, even though, against all odds, it shouldn't be possible.
I mean, it's quite clearly the moral at the heart of Jurassic Park is that you can't control nature and you shouldn't play God. But I kind of left Jurassic Park really wanting to see dinosaurs come to life.
Theoretically, we can retro-engineer a bird genetically to make an animal that would have dinosaur characteristics. We could right now produce an animal that would have a dinosaur-like head, it would have arms and hands instead of wings, some semblance of teeth, and we're not finished yet. We're still trying to deal with the tail. But when it really comes to the science of making dinosaurs or making anything genetically, I think it's actually a cool thing to do, and I don't see anything wrong with it at all.
Are we seeing a pattern here? The early atomic scientists, the contemporary AI scientists, everybody only sees the rosy future,
That's right.
the upside.
Exactly.
As they said on the Westworld poster, what could possibly go wrong?
And that gets the audience excited because the audience is going to see what went wrong, not what went right.
You know,
who cares about what went right?
If it goes right.
It's no fun at all.
Right. You're quoted as saying that Frankenstein is your autobiography. So are you Frankenstein's monster, or are you Frankenstein himself?
No, the creature.
You're the creature.
What happened to me is when I was growing up, and I felt different to the world I was growing up, I did feel out of place. And when I saw the monster play with forces that were outsized to his comprehension, I thought, this creature represents me. And there was a purity and an innocence to him, and I empathized completely with him, and I felt immediately a kinship, and I thought the impact emotionally for me was that big, was life transforming.
When you look back, the foundation of science fiction can technically be put on the shoulders of Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was very much the birth of science fiction. Shelley is one of the first authors to think about science and explore its impact on society.
Mary Shelley, she was living at a time when science was beginning to gain a foothold. So there was a belief that the world was understandable in a way that didn't involve religious or mythological mysteries.
Mary Shelley was visiting science lectures, people like Galvani, to see how newly discovered electricity was involved in living processes.
The story of Frankenstein, it's really about a scientist who has the arrogance to think that he alone can create a living being.
This idea of being able to create a human being from bits and pieces of other human beings is so potent, and it is echoed all over the movies. But that's when it really is crystallized.
In the first film version, Thomas Edison's 1910 Frankenstein, the creature is made not through electricity, but through a chemical process. Thomas Edison was considered the father of electricity, so he didn't want electricity to have any negative connotations. In the 50s and 60s, Victor Frankenstein creates his creature through atomic energy. In Kenneth Branagh's 1990s version, we have lots of images of the creature itself shooting from one tube to another tube until it's finally taken out of the final tube by Frankenstein in a very wet and messy birthing scene. And so literally, he's created the first test tube baby.
In the famous 1931 film, Dr. Frankenstein has a dead body on a gurney, and then the body twitches. At that point, Dr. Frankenstein falls in somewhere between hysterical and triumphant. In a way, this sums up all the fears and all the hopes you would have about making synthetic life, how awestruck we should be that we could do it, and how scared we should be that we could do it.
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
The problem of Frankenstein, of course, is that when Victor Frankenstein creates something that's ugly, he throws it out of his laboratory. And this transforms the creature into a monster who will eventually kill those people he loves most.
Subtitle of the book is The Modern Prometheus, which had to deal with the myth of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and bringing it down to Earth, which was a violation of the natural order. The creature realizes that he is that violation of the natural order.
Did you ever consider the consequences of your action?
This is a creature who asks why he is here. What is he for? Who created him? Who made this happen? Those are fascinating questions. And those questions begin with the Frankenstein monster.
So as long as people are thinking about that, people will be making Frankenstein movies or movies that are very obviously based on Frankenstein.
I'm working on something that'll change the world and human life as we know it.
Somehow I get the feeling you don't get out much.
The Fly is really an updating of the Frankenstein myth of trying to play God with new technologies and the idea that scientific hubris can ultimately lead to destruction.
So I invent this teleportation device, and I experiment on myself, but unbeknownst to me, there's a fly in the pod. The audience sees it, but I don't see it. And then sure enough, I come out of the other thing. I seem to come out okay at first, but by and by,
What's this?
you realize that my DNA has been fused with the fly's DNA.
You don't see an instant transformation as you do in, say, the Hulk. What you see in the Fly is a far more realistic portrayal of what is likely to happen in that situation, which is a slow and disgusting breakdown of cells to the point where basically he's falling apart as he is slowly mutating into a revolting hybrid of these two distantly related species.
I'm becoming Brundlefly.
So I remember 5 different stages of makeup. I'd have to get there at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning because I had some prosthetics, you know. And I had funny teeth, too. I had a few different stages of teeth. I got a kick out of it.
What these movies grapple with is that question of what happens when we do something we shouldn't, and what are the ramifications of that, and what is the fallout. And these movies are about that. The fallout is monsters.
To me, when I see a science fiction monster movie, it's about taking our angst and our fantasies and our terrors and making it an escape, a nightmare that's safe.
Yes.
You know, because when you're left alone with your nightmare at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not safe. But when you go into a movie theater, you're safe. There's people around you.
And you know it's going to last a certain amount
That's
of
right.
minutes.
It's a defined thing.
And things are going to get resolved.
Except for Alien. I saw it on opening night in '79 when it came out at a big theater, and man, people were screaming so hard they were throwing their popcorn.
Me too. I mean, there's that figure of speech, hide under your seat.
Yeah.
It was not a figure of speech. I literally went under my seat and I said to my dad, tap me on the shoulder when it's over.
The xenomorph from Alien and Aliens is the best movie monster ever because it is the scariest alien monster ever.
I think what is terrifying about the Xenomorph is it was barely on screen, it was very underlit, lots of flashing lights, and I think that's very much the power of the first Alien movie as a scary movie, is it left a lot to the imagination.
It's like the classic monster movie. And on top of it, you know, it was the first woman heroine which we have seen in a major motion picture.
You there, Ripley?
I'm right here. I was sent the script of Alien, and I think, frankly, commercially speaking, they thought, let's make the hero a woman. No one will ever guess that this young woman turns out to be the lone survivor. And I like the purity of that. We weren't making any kind of statement. And I think the other reason, of course, it appealed to me was that it was a rockin' good part for a woman.
I'm for killing that damn thing right now.
Well, let's talk about killing it. We know it's using the air shafts. Will you listen to me, Parker? Shut up!
So what possessed you to take Ripley, who wasn't given a first name, none of them had first names, and say, let's make her a woman?
You know, I hadn't realized the importance of women's lib and how women aren't really included because I was brought up with a very strong mother.
Yeah.
So I had already accepted that women will rule eventually anyway, whatever we do. And
see, you weren't making a statement. You were just observing the world that you knew and reproducing it.
Why not? To give Ripley the punch and power was the right thing to do.
Yeah. And science fiction has always been a genre that pushed boundaries. Of gender, conformity, racism.
It's a stage where anything goes.
Yeah. Her character is about facing her fears. And over the course of a number of films, she became a, kind of a global icon for feminism.
It really was the first movie where you had a woman that wasn't the victim, and that was major.
For years, it was a man's job to slay the monsters in science fiction. The women, at best, were either sent home so they'd be safe.
Stay here, Kate.
Or they had to get rescued from the monsters. Or, even worse yet, they themselves were the monster.
She'll tear up the whole town till she finds Harry. Yeah, then she'll tear up Harry.
Ash, when Dallas and Kane are off the ship, I'm senior officer. Ridley Scott did such an amazing job in portraying Ripley as a straightforward human, and then Jim Cameron took it to a whole new level with Aliens, setting up the relationship of Ripley and Newt.
Hard to believe there's a little girl under all this.
And then paralleling it with the Queen and her offspring.
The Queen Alien has sort of organic, flowing lines to her because she's feminine, she's hideous, but she's also very beautiful, which is fitting of an elegant, matriarch of an alien society.
So by the time I kill her children and try to escape with mine,
Grab onto me!
It's not like bad versus good. It's two mothers fighting for the life of their offspring, and I think it's done with, respect for both species. Happily, he gives Ripley the edge. Get away from her, you bitch!
I watched Aliens for the first time when I was 12, and I had never realized that women could do the kind of things that Sigourney Weaver was doing on screen, or look that way, or talk that way. The whole thing just blew my mind. There was this primal power that she had. Come on! Based on just this desperate need to survive and save this child. And I think that becomes that archetype of that female hero.
I think an audience likes to see women succeed and slay monsters. There wouldn't be as many franchises of the Alien movie if it didn't work.
When the original Sigourney Weaver Ripley arc of the Aliens franchise ends, we get a brand new awesome female monster killer, Alice in Resident Evil.
When Resident Evil came up, I was just really excited. I was a huge fan of the video game. Video games, I think it answers something very elemental in human beings, which is we're fascinated with dangerous situations, and the closest we could get to them without actually being in danger, we love. The Resident Evil universe is all about Frankenstein. I mean, the Umbrella Corporation is using their technology to create these things that could very well go out of control.
T-virus is manifesting itself in genetic mutation.
And surprise, surprise, they do.
One of the things that makes Alice a strong character is she fights what people might believe is like unbeatable odds. But she doesn't give up, and ultimately over 6 movies she triumphs.
I think monsters tell us everything about ourselves. I think the things that we're the most scared of makes us who we are in a way.
Monsters, in a lot of ways, are representing our fears. Are we gonna go too far? What do we still need to learn about this world? What are we not prepared for? Which is why I think it's so powerful and cathartic to see a woman slay her monster. And men too, but to see that figure of a woman literally staring down her fear and conquering it.
We often think about science fiction as a genre that celebrates boys and their toys, and yet there is a space for people of all different races and genders and creeds and colors, and perhaps even species, since we're being science fictional, to explore their hopes and fears and convey them to others about life in a high-tech society.
Science fiction at its best questions, challenges our belief on what are we, what makes us human, where do we fit in society.
Or shakes us, or tries to shake us up.
Yeah, so monsters are above nature, superhuman or suprahuman.
Yeah.
They allow us to question things that are eminently human.
Right. Now, don't you think that the film, The Thing, follows that same principle of making us fear the other in human form?
Absolutely. And that's a point of the story that I always am fascinated in the Carpenter film.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's about our place in the universe. And that's what makes that story so important.
Somebody in this camp ain't what he appears to be. Right now, that may be one or two of us. By spring, it could be all of us.
So how do we know who's human?
The Thing is an incredibly influential movie in science fiction because it gets at one of our most basic fears, that we might not be able to tell the difference between good and evil, or between ourselves and an evil alien imposter. The film follows the story of a group of scientists in the Antarctic who find a frozen alien.
What is it?
When the alien thaws, it turns out to be an incredibly hostile, shape-shifting organism that wants nothing more than to absorb us and conquer the world. As it absorbs people, it becomes unclear who's real and who has become the monster.
We're gonna draw a little bit of everybody's blood. We're gonna find out who's the thing.
You've got a monster story, and we're going to solve the monster story by doing experiments. That is classic science fiction.
The blood from one of you things won't obey when it's attacked. It'll try and survive. Crawl away from a hot needle, say.
The blood testing scene in The Thing is one of the great scenes I think in all movies. All the protagonists tied up. At least one of them is actually the monster itself. And watching Kurt Russell testing the blood, where the tension is just unbelievable.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
We'll do you last.
When that thing screeches up, you know. That was worth the price of admission.
The thing in The Thing, in some ways, it's one of, I think, the apexes of that kind of old school analog monster. Was actually there on the set with the tentacles and the teeth.
I mean, this is pre-CGI. Guys weren't doing this kind of stuff.
But the ultimate threat here in The Thing isn't even the monster itself. It is what The Thing evokes, the paranoia and terror that engulfs that station.
It isn't Venice.
The Thing was based on a story, Who Goes There, by the most influential magazine editor really in the history of science fiction, a writer named John W. Campbell Jr.
Did you have any plan in mind as to what you wanted Astounding to be?
I wanted to be a good science fiction magazine, and, oh yes, I wanted to learn how to be an editor.
So he began to establish a group of writers for his magazine that became the pantheon of modern science fiction. Robert Heinlein, for example, Isaac Asimov.
John W. Campbell Jr. What he wanted were people who would write stories in which the science was realistic. Realistic in the sense that the scientific culture be represented accurately.
He certainly shifted science fiction from boys' adventure stories in space to serious considerations of what the future might be like, and that set up what some writers think of as the Golden Age.
Campbell said that he got the idea for this story, Who Goes There, from a very personal incident that happened to him as a child. One day, he came home, saw his mother in the kitchen, and started talking with her, and became increasingly confused by her odd responses to his questions. It wasn't until his mother actually walked in that he realized he had been talking to her twin sister. This sort of uncanny moment when he thought he saw someone he knew and it turned out to be a different person, stayed with him for all his life.
He ain't tying me up.
Then I'll have to kill you, child.
Then kill me.
The Thing is definitely about the monster within, and how those monsters within us that would allow the fear to overtake you to the point where your friend you don't trust. You go down that road, and it can be monstrous.
I would say that in Pacific Rim, Foursquare science fiction, robots and giant monsters, you don't get any more science fiction than that.
In Pacific Rim, what I love is of the myriad of solutions that we can come up with to kill 25-story monsters, the one solution that probably would come on last is let's create 25-story robots.
Robots, right. The great majority of monster movies, you killed the monster at the end. So it's you stand that fear up and then you kill it. And you kill it by ingenuity, by willpower, by courage, whatever it is. And so I think there's an element that we create the monster so we can destroy it.
Of course.
Like in the 50s and all these B monster movies.
I certainly saw The Blob when I was a kid. And the fact that some oozing mass of sticky goo is going to kill me is a really good idea. It's a very B-movie, horrible, stupid idea, but it actually works pretty well.
The B-movies in the 1950s emerged because the horror genre went into decline and something had to fill the void. And science fiction was just the right fit for independent producers with just enough rubber monster suits to create something on the cheap.
Well, Creature from the Black Lagoon was probably the first one that I remember getting sucked into, and it kept me from swimming in lakes for years.
The killer shrews, I remember being quite frightened by it. At the end, people are claustrophobically in this sort of shed. I thought that was terrible, and I still have dreams of fangy kind of creatures.
There's a 1953 film called Robot Monster. The monster was a guy in a gorilla costume with a diver's helmet, made for $20,000, completely ridiculous, and yet audiences bought it, and it made over $1 million.
The monster movies of the 1950s, you can see very clearly the way they sprung out of World War II and the atomic bomb and this incredible fear about what had been unleashed.
Never in the history of the United States, a monster of such size and power.
People had discovered that radiation can change genetic structures and create, well, odd kinds of monsters.
The granddaddy of all atomic monster movies has got to be Godzilla.
Godzilla embodies the anxiety and the terror of
the nuclear
attack.
age,
Absolutely.
right? Sure. It's not a surprise that it emerged as a science fiction neo-myth from Japan, which had actually been bombed by nuclear weapons.
And in that way, monsters respond to the zeitgeist at the time they are
the zeitgeist.
So monsters are incredibly apt at embodying the abstract in flesh.
Godzilla was made less than a decade after the atomic bombings, and there were a lot of issues that were taboo. Japanese people could not speak amongst themselves or in the media about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, about the defeat, and about the fact that Japan, even after the war, remained subservient to the United States.
In Japan, you know, you can't make a movie about that stuff. But what if we make a movie about a giant monster who Americans invent this bomb? It wakes up the monster, and one of our cities gets destroyed and leaves radiation everywhere. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. You can make that movie. It's like, OK, cool. It's called Godzilla.
In Japan, the name is Gojira. It is a combination of two words, gorira, which means gorilla, and kujira, which means whale. So it literally means gorilla whale. The legend is this was a nickname of an overweight Toho Studios employee. The producer heard that nickname and loved it so much he gave it to the monster.
The first film is hardcore, very meaningful science fiction. And then, you know, they obviously think, what can we do next? And, well, let's have Godzilla fight another creature. And it became a bit silly.
And so Godzilla was transformed from being this vengeful force to being more of a protector and defender for Japan.
Our film, we wanted to bring back a little bit of the kitschiness in a modern concept. Because Godzilla is such a beloved character from Japan, the creators of Godzilla had a Bible. It was this thick. And in it was all the do's and don'ts, what it can do, what it can't do.
And we like threw it away. I hired one of the production designers of Independence Day, Patrick Tatopoulos, to kind of give me a new Godzilla. And I said, if I cannot make that Godzilla, I'm not making the movie at all.
The first shot that we had about Godzilla was a shot from the street looking up. And the first question we asked is, what's happening with the genitals? Should we see them? And it's funny because as joke as it is, Emmerich says, you know, I think she should be a female. She should have kids.
In many regards, we were trying to reinvent Godzilla. I think that the people in Japan felt, we don't reinvent our Godzilla. We like our Godzilla just the way he is.
I think when you're trying to make a science fiction monster movie, you're always looking for what's What's it really about? When we made our Godzilla, we definitely wanted it to be serious again. You know, at the end of the day, it's a giant monster movie, two massive creatures smacking the crap out of each other. But all that stuff's pointless if it hasn't got something at the heart of it that it represents. And so I feel like there's this sort of Western guilt that we don't really acknowledge or talk about. We nuclear bombed a country, and I think Godzilla in our film was representing that coming back to haunt us in a way.
Science fiction movies could be very cathartic. The reality is, in all of these movies, humankind ends up defeating the monster. The world is saved, and we come together when we most need to.
It's hard to come up with an original story. I mean, there's a lot of writers out there nodding their heads.
I think we're all influenced by the stories that came before us, going back thousands of years, by myths, legends, fairy tales. I think the worst films just refer to other movies.
Yeah.
The best films somehow connect you to something that you've actually experienced.
Yes. Well, Stranger Things has done that very well.
Yeah.
It touches on a lot of the movies that you and I and others have made, but it does it brilliantly.
Yeah.
It's an amalgam of genres, but all having to do with one thing, and that is you love those kids.
Yeah.
And you do not want anything bad to happen to them.
Right.
And Stranger Things, for all of its brilliant imaginings, are about those characters.
All I know is Will is alive. Will is alive. He's out there somewhere. All we have to do is find him.
We had a pretty steady, healthy diet of science fiction and horror movies growing up. They very much influenced Stranger Things.
A lot of our favorite stories in movies and books growing up all revolved around children dealing with a terror of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, like Spielberg has a history of putting children in traumatizing situations. So does Stephen King. They would take very relatable characters like families and kids, and who it felt like our family, it felt like our friends, it felt like us, and then put them into these extraordinary situations.
Stranger Things, it's about a kid who goes missing. He vanishes into like thin air. And one of his best friends and me go look for him. We go on crazy adventures and they confront this girl. She has powers. Then we confront other things like monsters. Not just monsters, one monster, the Demogorgon.
The Demogorgon has sort of this like ultimate movie or TV monster feel to it, almost like the prototypical nightmare monster.
We wanted to create a monster that we could build practically, and we wanted to go back to that old school style of filmmaking. And the thing is that once you commit to that, to building a suit, it limits you.
It was also very important that it was very weird. Because to us, you know, the weirder a design is, the scarier it is.
And sometimes it's simple things like removing, taking the eyes off.
By the creature not having a face, it really evokes the same idea of something in the shadows, a figure that you can't quite make out, but you have a familiar shape, but without any eyes, you don't know where it's looking, what it's thinking, which is terrifying.
Demogorgon, he's really tall. I would say he's probably like 7'1", Shaq's height. He has this, his face looks like a tulip, a flower, and it opens up with all this teeth and slime. We can't wrap our brains around what this thing is, and we can't pinpoint what to do and what it is. That's why we're afraid of it. And it looks pretty creepy, and it's trying to kill you.
The Demogorgon head was the most remarkable part of the entire Demogorgon suit. Because I don't see the way I normally see, I don't hear the way I normally hear, it makes it easier to feel like the monster. The direction I was given by the developers was very concise. I was the shark from Jaws. That I was this creature that came from this other dimension to feed. I think monsters who threaten children are particularly terrifying because it triggers this response in humans to protect the young.
Children are the ultimate vulnerability. These kids are right on the brink of becoming young adults. So some of the unleashing of this other world, I think, is metaphorical, and it allows us to think about What does it mean to pass from a state of childhood into being a teen? Sometimes you tangle with monsters, and sometimes you're sucked into a pool. Maybe these things don't happen literally, but it's a really horrific, terrifying process to grow up.
Who are you? I'm Maria.
Stranger Things is, in and of itself, a kind of Frankenstein monster TV show. It is all these different parts of all these different elements of pop culture.
All right, here I go, okay?
Okay, here we go. All kind of sutured together to create this new, kind of beautiful, horrifying thing.
And the whole bike chase and the van flip is obviously a not-so-subtle nod to E.T.
Well, dressing up 11, we just couldn't help ourselves.
A lot of Winona's character was based on Richard Dreyfuss.
Her Christmas lights are his mashed potatoes, basically.
When you're a kid and you're experiencing these films, there's a sense of wonder and awe and fear that just, it stays with you for the rest of your life. What we wanted to do was try to recapture the way those movies made us feel.
Sci-fi is an escape for so many people. And I feel those monsters, not just the Demogorgon, helps everyone in the world move on and feel good about the world when the world isn't doing well.
Well, I think what inflamed my imagination when I was a kid was simply fear. Fear, I think, you know, I needed to do something to protect myself against everything that I was afraid of. Most everything when it got dark, I was afraid of.
A lot of my process starts with dreams and nightmares. It's all getting out those childhood terrors and just making everybody else feel it.
Yeah, you kind of exorcise them from your own life, and then you foist them upon
everybody
strangers.
Else. Right, exactly.
And we love it, and we can't get enough of it, and so we can't stop.
Right.